One of the leading voices in the call for freedom is the exiled Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi, whose father was the last Shah of Iran, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. During his 37-year reign, Iran enjoyed unprecedented economic growth and improvement in the standard of living. Now the country is in economic ruin as the mullahs in Tehran ignore the plight of citizens in pursuit instead of nuclear arms, which the regime claims it is close to achieving with weapons-grade material. Joining us right now is His Royal Highness, the exiled Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi. And Your Royal Highness, thank you very much for being here this morning. We appreciate your time.
Good morning, Maria. I'm glad to be with you on your program.
So can you assess the current state of affairs? I know you want to talk a bit about what could be in Iran and the opportunity potential, but what would you say about the current regime?
It's becoming more and more fragile and fragmented, and this is because they are now faced with a new scenario. Until now, it was an era of sustained protest, but we have all of a sudden a completely new state of affairs under a revolutionary fervor that Iran right now is, ever since the death of Mahsa Amini. And as I could witness over these months, Iranians have been all over the country united in one voice, calling death to the dictator, basically mean an end to the regime. And of course, Khamenei now has to face this new reality and is hoping desperately to cling on to power, using, of course, repression as a means of intimidation and trying to maintain its avant-garde in the region as an extended element of intervention beyond our borders.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, they have also been calling death to America. And yet we have not seen a response from this administration. In fact, this administration wanted to get the United States back into the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. What would you like to see in terms of support from America?
It's important for America, among other countries in the West, to understand how close Iranians are in terms of values for freedom, for human rights, for equality, for non-discrimination. They are your natural allies in my country, unlike this regime who is the total opposite. It has been from the very beginning anti-American and, most importantly, against every values of free and liberal societies in the Western world. You have with you the most natural force in place, which are the Iranian people, who until now have been fighting all by themselves. It goes without saying that movements that are based on nonviolent civil disobedience as a means for change have ultimately been successful with the help of the international community, particularly Western democracies.
Well, it is incredible because a free Iran could change the makeup of the Middle East. Do you think there is a path for a free and democratic Iran if the mullahs are gone?
That is the ask of the nation, but I would like to bring you back to the issue that is now the most element that would be critical in changing the paradigm, and that is to designate the IRGC as a terrorist organization. Why is this important? Number one, it cripples the regime even further. It gives more access to assets that could be frozen and then repurposed to support the Iranian movement at home, namely labor strikes that we need as an instrument of pressure from within. In other words, if the focus has been on maximum pressure, I'm advocating that there's a need now for a parallel track of maximum support in tangible means. This is something that will empower the people while it will limit the regime in its means of counter-reaction and repression. This is one path to getting us closer to where we want to be.
Well, this is a very important point that you make. The UK Foreign Office will not make it official. The Biden administration has not pushed the UK to deem the group a terrorist organization. And so what would you like to see in terms of the international group? I know that you are going to be speaking alongside leadership in Ukraine. Is there an opportunity there?
Well, as you may know, I'm on my third leg of a European tour, starting with the Munich Security Conference, and I had meetings with French legislators, senators in France, and of course some meetings here in England, which I'm currently here for. And one thing that is very important, Maria, for all to understand is that finally Western countries have decided to enter in a constructive dialogue with those of us who represent an alternative to this regime, because until now dialogue was limited to the regime as its representative. And our argument was, how could you possibly hope to find an answer to solutions when you keep talking to the people who have been part of the problem to begin with? So that's a welcome step. As a result, we can really discuss the mechanics of how change can come about, how the Western community can help us in this process, and understanding the transition of power from the current regime after it collapses during a transition phase leading to what we hope to be a future secular democratic system, which of course changes the entire scene in terms of opportunities for Iran's future, and particularly as it might be of interest to Iranian business and industries, which has been totally shut out of the equation as a result of a regime has been always with a policy of being anti-Western, which has in fact helped mostly and favored China in that dimension. So if we want to look back at what it means for the U.S. beyond just stability, which means that they won't have to worry too much about a military presence anymore, but it also means all of economic opportunities that the U.S. could be enjoying in a completely different sets of circumstances, and the demeanor of our country, which will of course be welcoming those kind of developments, because we need foreign technology, we need new industries, and we need to refurbish our existing infrastructure. For all of this, there's a big play for American companies, obviously.
But, Your Highness, I'm glad you mentioned the military, because the IRGC, the military, pretty much controls the economy. If you get rid of the mullahs, doesn't that lead to a military-led machine?
Well, actually, the military, let's separate the military from the IRGCs. In fact, the reason the IRGC was created in the first place was to make sure that the regime would be somehow protected from a potential military coup against the current regime, starting with what happened at the time of the Iran-Iraq war. So the perception should be that the military wants to be a professional army at the service of the nation and protecting our borders. And it has, in fact, a lot of sympathy among people. Unlike the IRGC, which is pretty much an installed mafia that is armed and controls just about every aspect of the country, which is why it's important that they be targeted. However, our scenario of change includes a scenario of transition, a transition that is based on truth and reconciliation, a transition that plans transitional justice. In other words, it offers an exit strategy for the bulk of those who are not benefiting from the existing mafia, which is really limited to the top ranks, and they want to start thinking in terms of how can we bail out and basically find survivability beyond this regime. This encourages them joining with the people and limit the regime in any hope of further repression, while it opens the door for a more peaceful transition without having less desirable scenarios which may take it in a wrong direction of violence and conflict, as opposed to help facilitate a much less costly transition and peaceful transition in our country.
Well, Your Highness, this may very well be an incredible moment in time, a pivot. We will be watching this, and it really is amazing to me to watch the courageous women leading this new revolution on the ground, risking their lives for the country. We so appreciate your leadership and joining me today. I hope you'll come back soon as this story
With pleasure,
develops.
Maria.
Thank you
so much.
Your Royal Highness, the exiled Crown Prince of Iran, Reza Pahlavi.